I was born this way. Man, I tell you what, that's like the anthem of our generation and a lot of previous generations. I was born this way. Very, very common, especially these days. I was born this way. There's nothing I can do about it. I have no choice in the matter. I was born this way. This is the way that I am. Are you trying to reject who I am? Like, it is crazy. So it's pretty wild how people think this way when science is actually telling us that the brain doesn't work that way. Okay, so now I want to make a distinction here real quick. There is a distinction between the mind and the brain. Okay, so, and this is something that happens all throughout psychology, right? Like, this is a big deal. And there are arguments over this. There have been arguments over this, but there are things that we're able to use now. There are pieces of equipment that we can use now. We're actually watching things happen in the brain that show us self-control. They're showing us choice. They're showing how we choose things. It really is. We're watching free will happen in the brain. Okay, so let me just explain some of this, right? And it really is proving scientifically, has proven scientifically, that nobody can truly say I was born this way. Now, you could say this started happening from a very young age, right? You can say there are certain influences, right? But it's not just about influences. It is about choices. And we have choices. We can all truly take responsibility. Now, there's certain things that were handed to us. There's certain thought patterns that were instilled into us through pattern after pattern after pattern. Very, very consistent things that were either good or they might have been toxic, right? Now, all of that stuff all of those things are influences, right? Nobody's saying you haven't been influenced. Nobody's saying you don't have trauma. Nobody's saying that you haven't had very huge circumstances happen in your life, or things that you were subjected to in your life that have really influenced the way you think, the way that you process things. All of that is true, man. I get it, right? But we still have to take responsibility for what's going on in this brain. So I know I've talked about this in quite a few contexts, but this is a context where I'm really talking about I was born this way. Can we say that? Can we say that we were born this way? Now, there are certain things you were born with. There are certain traits that are DNA, right? DNA, right? DNA is something that is passed on from your parents, right? Certain parts of it, right? All of it, really. Now, there are certain things about your DNA that are static, like things that are the way that you look, right? The genome that can actually be tracked by forensic scientists, right? Like the DNA that you leave at the scene of a crime. I mean, come on. Like, this is stuff you can be identified this way. There are also packets of DNA that are zipped up, but that are dormant, that can be activated by certain signals. Okay, we'll talk about those in a second. Signals are actually thoughts and words. It's a big deal. Like, we're watching this stuff happen, okay? But neuroplasticity is really what I want to talk about, okay? So neuroplasticity, you can, people know this for a while. You do something 30 days, it becomes a habit, right? It's not entirely true with what we're learning with neuroplasticity, but we are learning that after about 7 days, if we do something consistently, or if we have a certain thought that we want to change and we're changing it consistently, that like we really focus on it. When you focus on something comes up from the subconscious mind that's very well formed or not well formed, regardless. Something comes up from the subconscious mind into the conscious mind, either intentionally or unintentionally, and when it's in the conscious mind, it becomes incredibly neuroplastic, especially the greater the focus, right? Not like something, hey, I'm watching TV and playing a video game at the same time, or a game on my phone at the same time as I'm watching a show. So I'm kind of, my mind is everywhere type deal. Not that, but the more focused you are, the more neuroplastic your brain becomes. Now, the things that I'm saying are all backed by science, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of studies, right? And a lot of it started out with these rats, that were like the agouti gene. the agouti mice, right? There's this gene that was passed on, and then they figured out a way to not pass it on. And they're like, oh man, we're on to something now. And then, epigenetics was born. It wasn't really born, right? Because epigenetics has been talked about in the Bible for thousands of years. But, I'm getting way ahead of myself. So, really want to focus on neuroplasticity. And so if you have a thought that you're trying to develop, like, I want to change the way I think about something because I've got something that I've identified in myself as a toxic thinking pattern, and I want to change that toxic thinking pattern. If for 7 days you will focus on changing that specific thought, and not just changing and saying no to it, but changing it into something good. So you're taking a toxic thought and you're turning it into a positive thought, right? If you do that for 7 days, you actually see a bump on that thing. It used to look like a strand, right? It used to look like a string in the brain. But then after 7 days, you've been so consistent with this thought, there's a bump on the end of it, right? And then after another 7 days, which is like you're at the 14th day now, it starts to look like a lollipop. It's this little strand, but it's got a bump on the top of it that looks like a lollipop now. It's such a pronounced bump that it looks like a lollipop, right? And then if you do it for another 7 days, which is 21 days, right? Then you've got something that looks like a mushroom in the brain. It's a strand that has a mushroom on top of it. And what is happening on top of that? Protein synthesis is happening at the top of that, right? Protein synthesis is changing the way that this thought is happening. You've got this thought that you want it to look a certain way, and now it's got this mushroom shape at the top of it because it's a well-formed part of your subconscious. Now, can you change that? Can you erase it? Yeah, by consistently thinking the polar opposite of that. Basically, you're deconstructing that thought and you're reconstructing a new thought, and this happens thousands of different ways with thousands of different thoughts all the time in our brain. Okay. Have I made you dizzy yet? This is crazy, and I'm not a neuroscientist, man. I'm not. I've just been studying this stuff because I'm fascinated with it, and because it agrees with principles that are in Scripture, and they've been in Scripture for thousands of years. Right? It's crazy. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. That is absolutely true. Epigenetics is not new to God. Neuroplasticity isn't new to God. God made our brains to be neuroplastic. Right? He made it to where we could choose what our thoughts would be. Now, does that knock out influence? No, it doesn't knock out influence. Does that change the fact that trauma affects you? No, but you can choose how you respond to trauma. A great example is, and many studies have been done on this. How about you have and this is fascinating, right, with twins, right? So you have identical twins, so their genome is the same. Their DNA is the same, okay? But one responds differently to a traumatic event. One becomes incredibly successful almost as a result of that traumatic event. They have used that as motivation. They have used it as this is something I'm going to use to motivate myself because of what happened to me. And the other one, no, they don't do that. They spiral downward as a result of that trauma. Okay? So, and they have the exact same genome. That's what's crazy. So you've got genetics, and then why have they started to study epigenetics? Why do they call it epigenetics? Epi means above. In other words, it's above genetics, right? It's operating above genetics. There's something called the mind, right? And the mind is not just the brain, right? The brain is the protein synthesis that happens because the mind chooses it. There is a spiritual component to man, and we've proven it. It is something that, it is backed by science, really good science. I mean, study after study after study, we have observed this. Certain things that people call science, and it's not really science because we haven't observed it. Part of the scientific process is observation, right? And we've observed this stuff in the brain, okay? So when you say that I'm born this way, you're literally saying, I was locked into this from birth. I can't do anything about it. I don't have any choice in the matter. It's just done. And we've proven it wrong with science. We're watching it with science. We are observing the exact opposite of that with science. We are observing that you choose what your beliefs are going to be. You choose what your sexuality is going to be. You choose the way you respond to your trauma. Like, is the trauma real? Yes, it is real. But how you respond to it is your choice. Now, I'm not criticizing anybody for this. But what I am saying is we have to take responsibility for how we have responded to certain things, and actually take responsibility for the fact that I wasn't just born this way. I chose to be this way. I chose to respond to my trauma this way. I chose to respond to my upbringing this way. I chose to respond to positive things this way. I chose to respond to negative things in this way. I chose my response. I chose how I thought. Now, it doesn't feel like you choose what you think, right? Because it's happening thousands of times per day, right? So we don't feel like we choose it, but we are choosing it. Every time that something comes up from the subconscious mind into the conscious mind, it never, ever, not a single time, goes back down into your subconscious without you changing it somehow. You either change it by changing the thought somehow, or you change it by reinforcing it. Yes, this is what I believe. Yes, I reaffirm that thought. Reaffirming that thought changes it. It makes it an even more well-developed part, like mushroom-ish, part of your subconscious mind. In other words, you don't have to think about it for you to think it. You don't have to think about it in your conscious mind for you to believe it, and for certain parts of you to act on it. And every cell of your body knows this. Your brain, once these things are formed in the brain, your belief systems are formed in the brain, it informs every cell of your body. This is what we believe. This is what we believe. This is why some people are perpetually sick, right? Now, certain parts of it come from your genome, right? And there's certain things that are like, they're in your DNA and they're dormant. And how are they unzipped? By what we believe, by thoughts and by words. You know, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And sometimes the thoughts are not as powerful as the thought and the words together, because you're literally speaking to every cell in your body. This is what we believe. I'm coming down with the flu. You realize that when you say you're coming down with the flu, your body is actually like, oh, well, let's just submit to this then, you know? And your immune system actually starts to slow down its response to that disease, because you said out of your mouth. We're watching this with science, okay? We're watching it. Because you said out of your mouth, you thought it in your mind, and you said out of your mouth, I'm coming down with the flu. Your immune system actually slows down its response to the flu and receives the flu. Like, it's amazing to me how some of this stuff is being watched and experienced, but it's study after study after study after study. It's not just one, and it is phenomenal. And the results have been really astounding when it comes to studying HIV, right? And one of the studies that was done out of the University of Miami actually had to do with someone believing that there was a God, a loving God in heaven. And the results became even more overwhelming. I mean, just overwhelming, like 4, 5, 6 times. No, I'm sorry, 400 times. 400 times the amount of response to HIV in the body, and like even the production of T cells, okay? 400 times less in people who didn't believe there was a loving God. And like, it even became more pronounced when it was just like, I don't believe in a loving God who loves me personally, right? Like, it affected the production of T cells. Like, oh, this is amazing to me. So I'm gonna stop, right? This is enough for you to go back and study on your own, right? But like, look at some of the studies that are being done in epigenetics, but especially in neuroplasticity, and look at the fact that we are not just born this way. We choose what we believe. We choose how we're going to respond to things, and we literally chose who we are today. And the hope of this thing, here's the hope in it. You can choose who you're going to be tomorrow by what you choose to put in your brain, by the beliefs that you choose to operate by. And like, literally, we are choosing this with our free will over and over and over again, thousands of times per minute, and all day, every day.